Thank you all for joining us to close the house today. My name is Ari Levine. I'm the Vice President of Brand Partnerships for Tumblr. Tumblr is the 15-year-old social media platform that's having a resurgence with Gen Z, as well as the past few days, a resurgence with disgruntled former Twitter users. So it's certainly exciting times. For those of you that didn't know, Tumblr is actually now part of Automatic. Automatic is the parent company of WordPress.com, Parsley Analytics, WooCommerce, and a group of companies that collectively reach over 600 million people a month. So we're happy to be part of Automatic and telling our story to the world once again. I'm really pleased to be here today with Dennis Potgraven, the Chief Strategy Officer of Wavemaker US. Dennis works with clients such as DoorDash, L'Oreal, Danone, Coinbase, Church & Dwight, and many others that he'll probably get in trouble for me not mentioning. We're here to talk about something that Dennis has great perspective on, because prior to this role, he spent 5 years working in China, which has been very far ahead of the US market when it comes to why e-commerce is chipping away at brand loyalty. With that, I'll turn to Dennis and ask, why is e-commerce chipping away at brand loyalty, and what can the good folks in the room and watching at home do about it?
Thanks, Ari. Yeah, I'm excited to speak about this topic because you see that, like you already said, with my experience in China, where e-commerce is kind of 40% of the total e-retail or the total retail business, so a very high share of consumers who buy predominantly already online. And this is kicking in now in the US as well, because you see, accelerated by the pandemic, that we are growing towards a 17% growth. But looking at some categories, like, for example, pet food, 40%, or consumer electronics, 50%, or sports apparel, also 40%. So these are already very massive categories where consumers start to buy very much online. And that's not only changing how we convert into business, but that's also changing the mindset of consumers and how they are attached with brands. And at Wavemaker, we find this topic super interesting because that is clearly also affecting very much how we build brands for our clients and how we approach a full funnel marketing approach. So what we did is we started to research this topic very precisely. And we did that through our research, which is called Momentum. And that's a database that we started 10 years ago here in the US. And it's also a worldwide database where we research like 42 categories on how consumers are going through the consumer decision journey. And particularly now we took 2019 and 2020 to compare on important categories. We looked at 7 categories, how that changes and how particularly also consumer engagement and attachments with brands is changing when they are buying online versus offline. So we really compared the offline situation with the online situation. And I think we had some very remarkable results because it centers very much around, like you already said, Ari, that consumers are getting less loyal to brands from the moment that they predominantly start to buy online. And first we thought that is very much kind of a category thing, like the categories that I already mentioned, but we see that it changes the total mindset of consumers, not only when they are buying online, but also when they are buying offline, as far as these categories are coming more and more predominant for consumers. And here you see the first research. You see that in this momentum research, which has a priming stage, so very much before consumers are actively into the category, when they are triggered at some point, and then you get the active stage. So you see that this loyalty to brands already starts at the moment when consumers only in that priming stage. So suddenly they are open to 50% more brands. So that means that in an offline situation, they would maybe consider only 2 brands when they're looking for sports apparel. But when they are looking online, suddenly they are open to 3 brands. Or when we speak about yogurts, they are very much maybe in an offline supermarket situation only looking at 4 brands. And then they go online and suddenly also because of out of stocks and other reasons, suddenly they are open for 6 brands. So 50% more brands in the evoked set. And then at the end of the journey, we see that we lose another 8% because we see that in an online journey, consumers in every category, including food, are reviewing and comparing much more than in an offline situation. In an offline situation, it goes very quick. And of course, online it goes very quick as well. We see that consumers start in every category to compare and review by default. And that's a big change because we see that this adjustment is costing brands a lot of money if you don't repair that, if you're not building very strong tactics to create that attachment throughout the total journey.
I love this. We talk a lot about Tumblr. At Tumblr, we talk a lot about brand love, and we have a lot of very passionate entertainment fans and fandoms on Tumblr. So one of the approaches that we've taken with working with CPG brands and with fashion brands is saying, how do we take the dynamics of fandoms, of tapping into the most active super fans, getting them to tell the story, learning the lessons from them, and getting them to reach the more passive consumers. So I love hearing about this and excited for what comes next.
Yeah, because when you speak about emotional connection, which is very much also in an offline world always the basic on how we build brands, that suddenly is not the only thing anymore. Because we see that on the second level, um, iconic products, and on the third level, CX, are becoming very important brand builders. So emotional connection still is very important, and we have more content and more digital opportunities to build a stronger emotional connection. But like I already said, consumers are becoming more comparing and more reviewing. So building really icons with tangible benefits and build your brand around that instead of only emotional connections has become super important, plus the CX. And we've been all talking about CX so long already. But now we see it really kicks in as a very, very important brand builder as well. Consumers suddenly are not into your brand anymore. And we speak about that a little bit later as well, when the total CX is not fluid. When a fluid or a better experience is offered by a competitive brand, that's a very particular reason and a very important reason now for consumers to switch to another brand.
I am curious when you talk about emotional connection. Earlier today, we had Rob Master from Unilever talking about brand purpose, and obviously that's been a big thing for Unilever. It's something that we found on Tumblr. Our users are more likely to purchase from brands when they know what they stand for from a social good standpoint. Does that fit into the emotional connection, or do you look at that more as part of the iconic product and what you're actually making?
That's a good point because that fits both in emotional connection, huh? A purpose, but at the same time, it should be more part of your iconic product because that's really also something tangible. And like I already said, these are the reviewing and comparing consumers. So if it's something that you're only doing as kind of a yeah, let's say a corporate responsibility thing. And we had the Hellman's discussion. Should Hellman's be very much a purpose-driven brand,
Sure.
or should it just be mayonnaise that is cheap and has the best taste? But particularly also building the iconity of the brand around that. Probably that kicks in much stronger for people who are buying online. As you see here, it's the second driver for brand attachment when consumers are buying online.
Got it.
So we have 5 ways how to keep on that attach or to how to keep maintaining that brand attachment or building stronger brand attachment when you are in a category that's predominantly or shifting towards online buying. The first one is all about brand building. We started talking about that already. So it's very nice to see that even brand building gets more and more important, like I already said, when you are predominantly start to sell online. But also synergy is here very important because we know that a lot of our clients already start to spend around 25, 30% in lower funnel and predominantly e-retail spending. But these kind of e-retail activities, where we also need to be very specific if we reach the right ROI, is often not holistic plans. So building brands, but also incorporating everything that you're doing in e-commerce, in e-retail, is super important. So that's the right balance thing, full funnel approach, including lower funnel and e-retail, which is often planned now siloed and more bottom up. The second point is very much around these icons, and I have a little picture about that. You see here a lot of brands who are building really these icons, but also keep on supporting them. And that's important for that online consumer because the decision is made quickly, the review and comparing I already spoke about, and it's very much an entrance for consumers to get more into your brand. The third point is very much around consistency. And why is consistency so important? Because, like we already said, when the consumer is reviewing, comparing, but using much more touch points, then this path to purchase becomes very scrutinized. So that means that all our creatives, from brand till performance, need to get much more consistency. But also for us as a media agency, that means that we are starting to plan much more for clients in a very consistent way. Our brand is always in that time slot. Our brand is always in that place. Our brand is always in that contextual environment. Building more consistency when the road to purchase becomes more scrutinized is a way to build more consistency and more attachment.
I love the iconic product. I think for a long time across social platforms, one of the best practices has always been to put the product front and center so people see it right away and get excited. But another best practice is that each platform, you should respect the nuance of the platform and the creative type and the specific audience. So I'm curious when you're talking about consistency across places with a never-ending stream of emerging platforms and formats and mediums, how do you approach that? How do you remain consistent against a diverse swath of media partners, placements, and audiences?
Yeah, I think you need to be very picky. And also, like I already said, media planning wise, it's very much about building that consistency. And there are so many options to build consistency, like I said, in time, in placement, contextual, but obviously also creative. Like I already said, performance marketing should have exactly the same brand message, visual appearance as brand creative as well. And you see that there is still a lot of opportunity to do better, I would say. So the fourth one, remember we had five. The fourth one is about creating a preference still also in the active stage. So what we often do now is that we are saying, okay, in the beginning, upper funnel, it's all branding activities, and then at some moment, it's all performance. But you see, for this consumer, it's important to keep on building also brand preference in the lower funnel. So combine or even plan additional brand activities when consumers are already in that more scrutinized process where they're also reviewing and comparing more. So that's an important one as well. And the last one is an ecosystem. And yeah, the ecosystem I think is a very interesting one. And today and yesterday there were already some talks about that. But I think now when you also see the increase in usage of social commerce, we are able to build also in this market. You mentioned China already before, where you have more digital platforms where you can build an ecosystem. But now also here in the US with social commerce becoming so important, we have an opportunity to combine the dots. We have an opportunity to bring that consumer from light or from habitual buying to repeat, impulse, engagement buy, and in the end, combine it with your own DTC approach. So now we can combine the dots.
And then how do you do that? Yesterday, Jay Altucher from Petco was telling the story of doing a walkthrough of stores with shoppers and then walking out, and 2 minutes later, no one could even tell the name of the retailer that they just walked out of and made their purchase. So how do you take this approach online and move it to the real world as well?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because you also see here in this ecosystem that physical stores need to be connected. 23% of all the online transactions in the US currently have already an element, often pick and collect, of O2O in it. And you see that also in China again, the very success cases, even when they are very online led, have a physical appearance. Also, recently there was a new article, Insider, about that particularly those um, brands who also connect the experience with an offline experience really build the total funnel. Sometimes you can do that digitally, sometimes that's with a kind of activation. But like you already see here on this chart as well, and obviously Nike is the best example, but there are a lot of examples how you can start building now, like we already said, with social commerce very much rising, a ecosystem where you bring consumers in on the retail with the a massive reach, and also a platform where you build your easier to adopt products. Then through social commerce and branded content, you can build up the engagement, you can build up repeatment buy, you can build up impulse buy, and then through a DTC approach, you can connect also the dots again when it comes to your in-store presence. So 5 ways to do that: building stronger brands, but looking at brands not only to be built from an emotional connection. You see that this consumer becomes more rational, really goes after iconic, tangible benefits, and also this journey is becoming so much more important to build strong brands. Consistency, already mentioned that as well, and keep on building preference also in the active, more performance stage of the funnel.
I'm curious, I see the social commerce, but so much of the value for brands today on social is not only the social listening and the insights and the learnings and the ability to tap into user-generated content, or what I prefer to call community-generated content, and even the world of influencers and creators and makers. How does this play into a world, and how does the brand, again, going back to that initial question, maintain that consistency when there's so many players and so many voices and so many perspectives on what makes the brand iconic?
Yeah, I think again, we spoke about social commerce, that also looking at influencers, user generation content, that it's very easily now to combine also with product presence and shopping, and everything is shoppable now. So that builds also the opportunity now to make it more consistent, I would say.
Got it. So really working closely with the partners, with the publishers, with the influencers to make sure everything's on brand, consistent, featuring the product in the right way.
Yeah, and build an ecosystem. Know where the journey goes, where you are going to attract your new consumers, where you are going to beef them up, create repeat, and where are you going to make them loyal, and have some kind of an ecosystem in place that you can adapt all the time, but know which platform and which um, part of the ecosystem you use for what, instead of just trying stuff.
That's so similar to the world of fandom, where you really want to go and you want to target the passive fans to get them having the conversation and buzzing, to bring in the laid back consumer that isn't really invested or loyal to one brand, and help convert them into super fans for you over the long term. Um, Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Any questions?
Not prepared for this, guys. Any questions? At this point, we're like casual. Like, just throw them out there.
Yeah. What do you got?
Otherwise, we will be probably for coffee or drinks after, so let us know if there's any questions left after the session. Yeah. Yeah, so what you see is that, like I said, there are so many and many more channels also that the consumer takes into account now before the final buy is done. When you see 25% more actions, but 43% more touch points, that means that your performance creative should not be totally different than the upper funnel stuff. So that can be very simple. You see still that performance is sometimes done by another agency, or it's done in-house, and it does not really reflect the stuff creative that you're doing in brand. So it can be a very simple way, but it can be also speaking about the ecosystem again, that even when you are in store, that you play up your brand. When you look at Casper, for example, when they are in a bath, bed, and beyond, it's still a very good kind of brand experience, even when the experience is obviously less I would say, intensive as in their own outlets, but still, you see, they keep on building brand preference even till the moment that you receive your parcel. So it's going also beyond media, but already in media and creatives, there's a lot of opportunity to make stuff more consistent. So, within B2B, would you say some of this is maybe happening too? We're like going online, looking at different products or services, and then you're not as loyal when you compare and review? Yeah, I think so very much because especially when you look at small medium enterprises B2B part, these are consumers, very rational. They act like consumers as well, and you see that particularly in these businesses, the shift to online is even stronger. So I would think that's very much the same battle.
How well are like how this is so this is part of your like planning, like taking this is part of the whole planning process. How organized how organized are clients to actually live into this?
I would say pretty organized, and that has to do with media buying here in the US because we all do upfronts here. So that means that kind of every um, client has an annual planning in place, which is not maybe everywhere in the world. Where not we buy so much based on annual planning already in advance. So yeah, I think we have very good conversations with clients during annual planning process to see how can we optimize not only what we are doing in media, but also connecting the dots. Like I already said, holistic planning for e-commerce, e-retail, and upper funnel media stuff becomes more and more important. Maybe a couple of years ago that was not done at all, and we are starting these conversations now with clients because they see that when it's 30% of your budget, where they also see that the ROI is not only always that good, mainly with the bigger platforms, there is a good ROI, but in the mid tier, there is still a lot of gain. Plus, you need to connect it more with the upper funnel as well, because it's 30 or 35% of your total budget already. So it becomes more and more important.
Awesome, great. All right, got another question. Oh, one more.
I'm going to throw Ari a curveball. How are you applying some of Wavemaker's advice while Tumblr is having its moment? How are you influencing brand preference now, per your comment about the Twitter moment?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we observe on the platform and what we share with brands as best practices for coming to the platform and for building relationships with Gen Z um, aligns with how we're thinking about user growth and user acquisition as well. It comes down to thinking about the right brand voice for the audience, the consistent messaging, the uh, the delivery of highlighting the value of what the platform has to offer, and a lot of efforts that we've been taking to re-educate audiences on Tumblr, because Tumblr is actually a little bit different than platforms like TikTok that are dominating the ecosystem today. We've seen people on Tumblr create user guides because Tumblr 2014 has been trending on TikTok for a big part of the past 6 months. So we see all these young people coming to Tumblr from TikTok and expecting it to be the same passive viewing experience. So we've seen users educating each other on how to actually use Tumblr and participate. And then we've learned from them and started creating our own materials and hiring creators. So many of the artists on Tumblr we work with, less as influencers, but as creative services. So having them create assets that we're then putting out as a brand to reinforce that messaging of how to use Tumblr and why we're a different place, and to make everyone feel welcome to the platform.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by consistency? So, what does that look like? Is that about the tagline? Is that about color? Is that, all of the above? And then also within beauty, we do a lot of work in the upper funnel, but then when you get to something like D2C, there's a lot of discounting, 20% off, gift with purchase. How does that impact? And is that part of what you're talking about here in terms of consistency?
Yeah, it's mainly also how you appear. Huh? You cannot influence, indeed, maybe you even don't want to influence your promotional offers to that extent. So it's very much also how you appear, so that the consumer sees it is still one journey, even when there are 43% more touch points. It can be color, can be tagline, but also, like I was said, in a media placement, that you also try to be more consistent there instead of only looking after what delivers the easiest reach at the moment or the highest attention value. That consistency also becomes now one of the parameters how you plan. So it's both creative, but also we see more and more an opportunity to do that consistency in media placement as well. Time, format, context.
Got it. Thank you.
Perfect. Anybody else? All right. Thank you guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.